Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our fourth Learn From Home Live. My name is Rose, and I am the Marketing and PR Coordinator here at Ocean Sonics. For those of you who joined us last week and the weeks before, you'll know that we regularly hold staff learning sessions at our office, and this is where our teammates share their expertise with the rest of our crew. Now, because many of us, and not just Ocean Sonics, that we're working from home these days, we wanted to share our internal learning sessions with you. So we're going to be doing these live sessions regularly, so keep your eyes on our social media channels. That's our Twitter, our Facebook, our YouTube, as well as our Instagram and LinkedIn pages, because we'll be sharing all of the information on our social channels. We'll share information such as upcoming topics and sessions. And for the month of May, we are going to be focusing on passive acoustic monitoring, mitigation techniques, and how acoustics are used within the ocean industry. So for those of you who tuned in last week, Ashley Noseworthy of Edgewise Environmental gave a great presentation introducing passive acoustic monitoring from a seismic surveying perspective. And if you missed the session, don't worry, we recorded it and it now lives on our YouTube channel, as well as on our Facebook page. So you can visit or revisit anytime you'd like. Today's session is also going to be recorded and shared online, so don't worry if you missed something or if you want to watch it again, it'll be available for you. So for everyone joining us today that's unfamiliar with Ocean Sonics, we're an ocean acoustics company. We're based in Toronto, Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada, and we created the IC Listen. This is a real-time smart hydrophone, and it's a tool that's used to collect ocean sound data, and what makes it so special is that this hydrophone processes data in real time, so you can actively listen while the sensor is deployed. So for today's topic, last week, Ashley helped us understand when and why we protect marine mammals during industrial activities. And today, Jillian is going to tell us a little bit more about how we do that. And she's also going to be including a detection demonstration using PamGuard in the form of a short video to show you how we detect marine mammals in a real-time application. So Jillian joined Ocean Sonics in 2017. She's our staff biologist, and she is our resident marine mammal expert. And she's actually a former student of Ashley Noseworthy. She completed the Edgewise Environmental Marine Mammal Observer course. Jillian's a trained passive acoustic monitoring or PAM system operator. And since she completed the course, she has even returned to Newfoundland to help assist with portions of the Edgewise course as an instructor. So hello, Jillian. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the monitoring methods. So using real-time data, how do we collect that data? Starting simple from using one hydrophone and then kind of increasing the complexity. So what you need to add to a system to make it more usable and maybe like depth or distance from shore. And then talking about some of the deployment systems. So using kind of our equipment, but any kind of equipment, just looking at the cable deployments and autonomous deployments. And then finally, I'll end with a PamGuard plugin demo from our IC Listen.
Fantastic. So I do want to remind everybody this is a live session, so if something goes a little bit wonky with the demo, we are streaming from home. So
yes,
fingers crossed everything goes well, but we're going to do our best to show you some really neat software and applications today.
Yeah, great.
All right, so after Jillian has finished her presentation and demoing the software, we are going to have a Q&A session. I've already received a couple of questions for Jillian, and if you want to know something in more detail about what we covered today, just leave us a comment on any of our live stream feeds. I am monitoring them right now, so we'll be able to answer your question live after the presentation. So Jillian, why don't we start right off and get into it?
Yeah, cool. Here we go. Share it now. Here we go.
Perfect. All right, take it away, Jillian.
Great, thank you. Okay, so today we're going to learn at home with Ocean Sonics, looking at this monitoring methodology and IC Listen PamGuard plugin. And it's going to be presented by me, Jillian Duggan. So the monitoring methodology, equipment, and deployment. So first off, I'm just going to give brief overview of what we're going to be looking at, and then we'll dive right into it. So the first thing is real-time data, collecting that with digital hydrophones. And as I said before, starting simple and then increasing the complexity. So what do we need to do these different types of monitoring projects? So we're going to look at a few deployment systems that are both cabled and autonomous. And then finally, we're going to look at the PAMguard plugin for the IC Listen, which kind of shows us how we can actually process this data that's coming from these hydrophones while we're monitoring in real time. So real-time data, what do we want to do with it? First, we want to collect it. So we need the equipment to collect the data, and that usually involves at least one hydrophone for listening to the sound underwater. And here is a picture of one lone hydrophone that's on a little stand with a little fish that's actually huddled underneath it, and a cable, the green cable that's to the left. And then after we collect the data, we need to process this, and this has to be in real time. So real-time processing, and this could be detecting, classifying, tracking, and localizing marine mammals. And we want to do this in real time, so we need something that can do that. And then finally, we want to report or an action that occurs after we actually process this data. So this can be anything that results from the data. So it could be the classification, and this would direct the next actions that are necessary. So this could be detecting a marine mammal in an area where there's heavy shipping, and then there could be a report that's put out to mariners in that area that says to slow down and look out for these types of marine mammals that might be there. So starting simple. First, we can see here the simplest real-time monitoring, which is this hydrophone, a cable up to a laptop, and this fine person is in a little boat, and so we see the hydrophone, which is marked off by this H cable, the green cable, and the computer. And along comes our marine mammal, and this humpback whale that says hello, and ooh. They can see the sound that's actually coming from the marine mammal. So a system like this could look like a digital hydrophone, shown right here. So this is the IC Listen cable that comes up, and this cable can be attached to either our laptop, or we could attach it to something like our launch box that actually uses Wi-Fi. And so this would actually stream all the data that's coming from this hydrophone to something like our computer where we could actually see it. And these digital hydrophones, they can produce real-time data without additional equipment. And they go from 10 hertz to 200 kilohertz, and they're 24-bit. These have real-time data streamed directly to a laptop or over Ethernet, so they easily set up with the Wi-Fi. And you can program our hydrophones in a web browser. And the IC Listen hydrophone array can be created by actually just attaching cabling together multiple hydrophones, and they can self-synchronize. So here I have an example of a deployment off of a vessel. And I thought this was pretty important to put out to show people just some real photos of our products being deployed, but also showing kind of some measures that we like to do as well, like putting a rope around the hydrophone and not just the cable, so that we're actually securing it and making sure that we're not putting any extra strain on our connectors that are right off of the hydrophone, and also making sure that we have a secondary line to the hydrophone so that we're not, potentially losing it in the water. And this is actually on this side, the right-hand side. We can see the hydrophone is in an array, so this longer rope actually goes down to more hydrophones. And right here, showing from, you can tie a rope right around the hydrophone, but you can also just use little zip ties and attach it to a rope. So it's pretty easy for anybody to set up, and just make sure you have that extra security there and you're not going to lose your hydrophone. Another example is Dr. Valeria Vergara, who does research on belugas in the Arctic. And her research involves putting a hydrophone into the water And so this can be just a hydrophone cable, a computer with some headphones, and she has a few extra batteries right here that can actually power her laptop as well as have extra battery for the hydrophone. And this is where she sets up, and it's actually on sea ice, and she's able to just deploy this hydrophone right from her position here and able to just lower it into the water and listen for belugas. And she can listen to belugas in real time using these headphones. And here we see she has actually a cable that goes all the way from out here in the water and actually comes all the way up to where she's listening to the belugas from her little perch. And she's able to actually count the belugas as well. So making notes on what they're doing, as well as what sound she's hearing at that same time. So since we started off quite simple, one hydrophone listening in the water, and you can listen for pretty much anything. So what happens if we want to increase the size, the depth, and the range? So if we want to increase the size, we want more area. So we want to cover larger area. We want to listen to more things. That means that we're going to need more synchronized hydrophones. Depth, that's going to increase pressure that's actually put on the instruments. So if we're going down deeper into the water, we have to make sure that we have specified depth rated equipment. And range. So if we want to go further from shore, that's going to increase the distance. So the transferring of that data in real time over longer distances, we're going to have to look into that and see how you can do those kinds of things. And so that usually involves a radio up to satellite. And all of these increasing in complexity, those require more energy. So that's for power, for actually powering the instruments, and also computational when you have to transfer all that data over longer ranges. So first, I'm just going to start off by talking about depth and distance from shore. So you want to ask yourself, how deep is your deployment site? So how deep do I need to go? What types of hydrophones do I have to get to actually handle this environment? And we have a variety of hydrophones that are used in shallower water, so 200 meters to 900 meters, and then up to 3,500 meters to 6,000 meters. And how far away from shore? So how far away are you going? Length of deployment, so how long are your hydrophones actually going to be out in the water? Could it or should it be cabled to shore? So is it an environment where you could actually cable it back to shore and provide power for the entire project? Or maybe we want to have it transfer the data through a radio. And this will determine your type of deployment. So it could be cables from a platform or towed from a boat. It could be possibly a buoy that's cabled or a drifting buoy. Or it could be a glider or ASV or an AUV. So there's many different types of deployments that you can actually do. Moving on to depth. So your deployment depth will influence the equipment that's used, as I said before. So the hydrophones require depth rated, so you'll need depth rated hydrophones. You'll need specific materials, potentially something like a titanium that will be able to withstand the pressure in those deep environments. And also you have to be aware that hydrophones measure pressure, and at depth, it becomes increasingly difficult to measure that. So the further down you go, the more increase in pressure you're going to have, and those are going to need specified hydrophones to actually go that deep. And then you'll also have to think about cables as well. So if you're using a cable either to the surface, where you might be transmitting the data through a satellite, or a cable that actually goes all the way to shore, you're going to have to think about depth-rated connectors, depth-rated cables, and the longer the cable, the increase in power and the increase of data transfer. And finally, the distance from shore. So the distance from your equipment to the land or the researcher. And so if it's only to a vessel with a researcher on it, you might be in the middle of nowhere. But if you're actually close enough to your equipment, that is actually much easier to do. So you might be able to do it through a radio or Wi-Fi even. And there's also other types of data transmission. So closer to shore, people are able to use cellular data. So if there's cell towers near where you're doing your deployment, you can also do Wi-Fi and radio. And in those more remote locations, you're kind of, you'll need to do more of like a radio or a satellite. And the data transfer rates. So the data transfer methods, as I said before, a cable can be in real time, a radio can be in real time or close to real time, as well as the Wi-Fi and the cellular. And then satellite is usually near real time, so you're actually having small breaks in between, just transferring that data for very long ranges. And here I have a little graphic of kind of the data transfer distances. And so if you're a person on shore, like how far can you go and still receive that data? And so for these, the Wi-Fi and the cellular data, those are usually 100 meters. So a Wi-Fi connection usually lasts around 100 meters. You can get up to like a point-to-point system for about almost a kilometer or a few kilometers. The cell data, it is kind of tricky because you need to be around cell towers that are on shore. So if you're somewhere remote where they might not have cell towers, you might not have that distance. So you might not have 10 kilometers, but you can have up to 10 kilometers offshore with cell data. The radio, so radio can go from 10 kilometers to 100 kilometers, depending on the type of radio that you're using. And then finally, satellites, these can go hundreds of kilometers. So satellite has pretty much unlimited data transfer distance. And people can also use a mixture of methods for deployment. So maybe you have your data being collected a few meters offshore where you have it cabled back to shore. And then you might have something like a radio transferring from a remote shore station to somewhere where you actually collect the data. So these radios can be transferred to stations, and then they can be cabled to an internet where you can actually access that data. So again, close to shore, we usually are using cables, cellular, Wi-Fi, or radio. And far from shore, radio or satellite. So now I'm just going to move on to some different types of deployment systems. So we have I grouped into two types of deployments. So one is a cable deployment where your equipment actually has a cable to the surface. So that's how you're getting power to it, and that's how you're getting the data from it. So there's no limit on the power supply and data processing. So I said on this side, anything that's cabled is unlimited power supply and data processing, and anything that's autonomous, so it's not cabled to you and you're not getting the data from a cable, this does have a limited power supply and data processing. So the types of cabled arrays that we can look at, they can be cabled to shore or platform, and they can be temporary or permanent. And so this would include stuff such as observatories, which I spoke about a few weeks ago. And these can also be cabled to a vessel. So if your hydrophones are cabled to your vessel, so either hanging or dipping a hydrophone in the water or towed behind the vessel, such as what Ashley was talking about last week with seismic work, where they tow the hydrophones behind the vessel. And then the autonomous arrays, so limited by power supply and data processing. These could be buoys, so either moored or drifting. And also gliders, autonomous underwater vehicles, and unmanned surface vehicles. So these cable deployments, the cables can transfer large amounts of data. So this can be fast processing and actually transfer data from multiple hydrophones at the same time back to shore. And the cables allow for permanent power to the instruments and the equipment. So you're never worried about having a battery that might run out and then not having that data actually being collected any longer. And for this, I have an example of an HCI. So it's a host controller interface right here. That's on shore. And this also has a GPS and a radio on it. And this is actually cabled out to on here. This would be 4 hydrophones and an IC link. And so that would be in the water somewhere, and this would be cabled to shore. So these can be deployed permanently, and they allow for real-time monitoring and localization of marine mammals. They record continuously over a broad frequency range, so you're not limited by how much you can actually record, so your sampling rate can be very high. And there's no or less restrictions on the data storage, the data access, and the power supply. And so these would be things like observatories. So acoustic networks in ocean observatories. Now, this is a little bit of a different deployment, as I spoke about right at the very beginning with a launch box, a cable, and a hydrophone. And these are temporary, simple deployments. So they're used commonly when monitoring a specific area for opportunistic data. And this can include environmental monitoring or marine mammal monitoring, and includes dipped hydrophones, so actually placing the hydrophone in the water over in a vessel, off a vessel, shore, or even sea ice. And also on this side right here, we have an ROV, so you can actually attach a hydrophone to an ROV and have the data stream to the surface as well. And this is cabled directly to a computer, or it can be through Wi-Fi. And this next one is a cable deployment as well, so towed behind a vessel. And this is what Ashley was speaking about last week, where we're towing a hydrophone behind a vessel. And if you tow an array consisting of at least 2 hydrophones behind a vessel, you can actually use this to obtain bearing angles to a sound source. So you can actually track and localize sounds in the water when you use 2 or more hydrophones. And the convergence of the bearing angles as the ship travels allows for localization of the sound source with left-right ambiguity. And the ambiguity can be resolved by integration of a second array offset from the first, or by changing the direction of the ship. And these types of towed arrays can be used for detections of baleen whales, dolphins, porpoises, and many other marine mammals. And they have some limitations, such as the left-right ambiguity, but also being towed in the water does sometimes create extra sound, especially the closer it is to a vessel, the more sound you're actually going to get from that vessel. And the example here is just a hydrophone, a cable, this towfish, and its connection from a launch box to a computer. So I'm just going to show this next slide where it shows the towfish in the water. And this is a cable grip, so it's a cable that's actually coming to shore. It's cabled to this launch box, and the launch box just sends all the data from this hydrophone to a computer that you can view from the nice, comfy inside quarters of the ship. And yeah, this is kind of just the basic way that you can set it up on the back of a ship off of an A-frame. So if we look at some autonomous versus that cable deployment, so these are deployed without a cable. We can look at first the surface moored buoy. So this is a fixed or static buoy. So it's staying in one place and it's anchored to the seafloor. There's a float at the top that actually transmits all of the data, and this can be radio, cellular, or satellite. And it can have multiple recipients. The hydrophone is located at a set depth below the surface. So you never see the hydrophone. It's actually usually mid-water column. And on the top of these buoys, we can see sometimes they're solar powered so that they're able to get the power that they need from the sun. So that gives a potential for a more continuous deployment and a longer deployment, but they are limited based on the power and the transfer of that data. And the data transfer does become more costly, so further you're transmitting that data, especially through satellite, and the more you want to do, it becomes pretty costly pretty quickly. The second example that I have of an autonomous deployment is the drifting buoy. So instead of a static buoy, this drifts in the water. So you can actually let it go and it will follow a current. It's similar to a fixed buoy, but can be smaller and can have batteries actually put into it for shorter deployments. So sometimes people are able to do day-long deployments where they allow their drifting buoy to drift over the day and then take it in at night, and they could recharge the batteries and then allow it to drift during the next day so that they can keep an eye on it as well. These can be Wi-Fi, cellular, or radio, so you can actually stream the data from your drifting buoy while it's collecting it. And a positioning device is required so that you do not lose your drifting buoy. And here I have an example of a hydrophone, a cable, the drifting buoy with a Wi-Fi or radio, and a GPS. Another example is the sonobuoy with VHF radio transmitted to the vessel. So here's just a breakdown of what is in a drifting buoy: the radio, satellite, or Wi-Fi transmission, the GPS that keeps it time synchronized, as well as data of where it is, and the batteries. Here's a little cable, your hydrophones, so you can have many hydrophones. This one has 4. And this is kind of just another mock-up of what it would actually look like if it was in the water. And here it's attached to a smart cable. These hydrophones are attached to a smart cable. And then this is what would be floating at the top, would be your syntactic foam on this buoy right here. And finally, I have the autonomous gliders. And these can collect data in very remote locations safely and a relatively low cost. And there's no human intervention, so they're fairly safe. And they can measure in extreme environments such as hurricanes. There's a wide variety of sensors that can actually be integrated into these types of gliders. And they can be deployed for months, like days up to months. And here I have 2 types of the gliders, so the Slocum glider and the wave glider. Here. And on these, they usually contain a hydrophone, cable, some type of processor that's actually inside of the glider itself, and they have a GPS, and they transmit their data through satellite. Okay. Now I'm going to move on. Since we went through all the ways that we can collect the data in real time, I'm just going to hop over to some data processing. And as Ashley mentioned last week, that PAMGuard is very widely used in the industry. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. So detection and classification. PAMGuard is the industry standard for marine mammal monitoring. With data transferred to your computer, the wave data can be streamed in PAMGuard. And PAMGuard can do detections and classification of marine mammal calls. With multiple hydrophones and a GPS, with localization on your hydrophones, you can actually localize to where marine mammals are with GPS and synchronized hydrophones. They are used to determine the time of arrival. So the first thing you'll want to do if you actually want to run PAMGuard with an isolocin hydrophone is to download PAMGuard. And the most recent version, the past version of PAMGuard 64 was, I believe, 1.15.17. And they have a brand new version that actually just came out recently that is a beta version. So PAMGuard Beta 2.01.03. So you can download either of those. And we do have two different plugins for the two different versions. So if you download or if you have been using PAMGuard 64, you can download the plugin for the older version of PAMGuard. Or if you're using the PAMGuard beta, you can download the newer PAMGuard plugin that we have for the IC Listen. So once you download PAMGuard, you're going to download the IC Listen PAMGuard plugin from Oceansonics. So you can get that from us emailing either Rose or myself or anybody at Oceansonics. And you can download the version based on your PAMGuard. And it's a .jar file. And the first thing you'll want to do is download that file, and you place the jar file into the plugins folder for PAMGuard on your computer. And so you just open up your computer, so your Windows so your computer program files, and you'll go to PAMGuard 64. You're using the PAMGuard 64 version. Once you open that folder, you can go into this plugins folder. Just double click on the plugins, and you can just copy and paste the jar file into that folder. The next thing you'll want to do is open PAMGuard. So you can open PAMGuard with a previously saved .psf file, or you can open a new file, so create a new session with it. But if you already have types of sessions that you have for monitoring that you might be given by someone, you can use those as well. And essentially all we're going to do is add in the IC Listen as a sound acquisition module. And to do this, you go under File, Add Modules, Sound Processing, and then you just click on Sound Acquisition. And then when you go into the sound acquisition, so it'll say audio data acquisition, and you select your sound acquisition device. And if you have your IC Listen PAMGuard plugin put into that folder, you should be able to select your device from the sound acquisition settings, sound acquisition. So you just use this little drop down right here, and it will show up a bunch of different options. But at the very end, it'll say IC Listen DAQ plugin. And that's when you're going to select. And once you select this, this information will come up onto your little window that pops up. And so what you'll need to actually put in here is your net address. And so that is the IP address of your hydrophone. And to find your IP address of your hydrophone, you can actually go to Marco and look for the IP address there. And you can just copy and paste it into this net address. The next thing you're going to do is choose your waveform bandwidth, so whatever sampling rate you want to sample at. There's a little drop-down menu right here, and it will tell you what it gives a sampling rate of. And then finally, once you have all that selected, you're going to press Connect. Once you click Connect, it will take a few seconds, and it will connect to the stream of the hydrophone, and it will let you know, it'll say connected to IC Listen HF with your hydrophone number. And once that happens, you should successfully have a connection message on the PAMGuard window. It'll say IC Listen DAQ plugin connected to HF, this one right here. And then if you're not using any of this other stuff, so if you do use a sound output, you want to listen to the sound, you're going to actually probably come back into here and look at this gain setting. But otherwise, this should be okay, and you can just click the OK button right here. And then once you have that all set up, you're ready to move on to the next parts of actually setting up PAMGuard, which would be whatever you're interested in for your deployment. So the first thing usually people want to set up is a spectrogram so that they can see their data. So you'll want to add FFT processing, and then a user display, and then a spectrogram. And then you might also want to be looking at click detectors. So if you're looking for different things like a porpoise or dolphins, you might want to use click detectors. And then you can also use whistle and moan detectors. And so that's pretty much the demo on how to get it set up. And I'll just show you a little demonstration on my computer of it running. Just going to get out of this, maybe get out of the presentation. Here we go. Go back to here. Great. Okay. Now I'm just going to share the PAMGuard window.
And while Jillian is getting the PAMGuard window set up, I did want to remind everyone who's watching who might be interested in using PAMGuard with your iSolus and hydrophone. You can contact anybody at Ocean Sonics. We have been working on a plugin that makes it very easy to set up your hydrophone with PAMGuard. So connect with anyone at Ocean Sonics, and we'll be happy to walk you through that.
Woo! Okay, yeah. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, everything's live.
Yeah, okay, so here is PAMGuard in all its glory. I have right now set up, I'll show you the data model. So right now I have a sound acquisition device with the PAMGuard plugin, and then I have the FFT spectrogram engine that's running. So I'll show you a little bit. So first you would go into here, as I said before, where you actually choose sound acquisition. The next one that I chose was an FFT spectrogram engine, process the spectrogram. And then the third thing you want to do is add a user display. And so this is what this is right here, a user display. And you just click new spectrogram. And so that will actually give you this spectrogram right here. It does take a little while to actually go into the settings and actually make sure that you have the proper sampling and you have the proper color, so your colors that are showing up here. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of it actually streaming. So here it is here. It'll go through here and you'll actually be able to see the raw input data from sound acquisition, as well as your FFT spectrum engine. And so once you have this set up, this is actually streaming from our office. So it's taking that data from a hydrophone in our office, and it's actually streaming it to my computer. But you can set it up in a variety of ways. So you can add different things like sound processing. So seismic veto, that's important for seismic work, as well as different things like sound processing, detectors, so click detectors, whistle and moan detectors, and also likelihood detectors. And if you're looking for right whales, you can do a right whale edge detector as well. So that's just a little bit, showing a little bit of how you can use PAMGuard with our hydrophone right now. There we go.
Very cool. I'm so glad that we were able to stream that all the way from the office, because that was really interesting to see. And thank you for that, Jillian. So let's get right into some questions. And remember, if you do have a question for Jillian about something that you saw today, or something that you'd like to know a little bit more about, perhaps deployment methods, mitigation techniques, or passive acoustic monitoring, just leave us a comment in any of our social media feeds. I am watching them right now, so we can answer your question live. If you decide that you'd like to ask us a question later, we will provide our contact details, so you can always be in contact with us if you'd like to know more.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jillian, one of the questions we have is, why PAMGuard? Why is that the industry standard?
Yeah, okay, so PAMCare was actually created for the industry, so for a lot of these marine mammal monitoring projects, and kind of actually it was tailored to actually doing that kind of sort of monitoring in real time and making sure that those monitors can actually see that data and look for different things like click detection in whales and the whale calls and stuff like that. So I think that it was kind of put more into that direction, as well as that it's an open source software, so people can kind of go in and tailor it to their own different projects that they may have as well. So it's pretty complex, but can be used in a very different variety of fashions as well.
You mentioned click detection. Can you do click detection along with the general data collection that you just showed?
Yeah, exactly. So you can do high frequency click detection. So you can actually look at and detect clicks in real time.
Very cool. So why is this real-time detection essential? Why is it important that we do this in real time?
Yeah, so it's essential in many projects where there may be some sort of potentially unsafe environment for marine mammals. So if a marine mammal goes into that area, they might get harmed in some sort of way. So it's um, pretty essential when you're looking at high ship traffic area or an oil spill or any type of marine construction or seismic work where that noise that's being created may impact marine mammals in some way. So it's important to know where they are and how we can minimize any harm or damage that may come to them. So making sure we know where they are so that we can minimize that risk to those marine mammals is really important.
So you mentioned seismic. What other types of industrial noise can affect marine mammals?
Yeah, so there's a lot of vibratory pile driving as well as impulse pile driving. So when they're setting up any type of construction projects, there's also blasting, dredging. There's many things that we do in the marine environment that can create noise for these marine mammals.
And I suppose that passive acoustic monitoring doesn't need to be just for construction, but it could also be for vessel traffic or ports and harbors, monitoring those types of situations as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be used in a variety of ways.
So you spoke briefly there about marine mammals. How are they affected by these types of noises?
Yeah, so marine mammals, as we can kind of think about that they use sound as kind of their primary means of communication with not only each other but also for finding food and finding mates. That's pretty much how they see underwater. So they're using that noise so they can communicate and navigate their environment. And when there's increased noise in that area, it becomes more difficult for them to do those types of things. Um, yeah, so it can be pretty damaging to them.
So in one of your earlier slides, and this is a question for myself, you mentioned detection, classifying, tracking, and localizing. What does all of this mean altogether, and why would we do all of that?
Okay, yeah. So detecting is actually just hearing something and saying, oh, there was a sound there. And then classifying is going a little bit deeper into it, saying, okay, what kind of sound was it? So we're actually classifying, saying, okay, this was a whale call from an orca. And maybe it's a southern resident killer whale, so southern resident orca. And we can say, okay, that's the type of whale. And then if we wanted to actually look at it. So if we want to look at it over an area or a space, and we want to look at tracking or localizing it within an area, if we set up multiple hydrophones around that area, we can actually see and kind of track where they are in space and time. So that it might be very important for southern resident killer whales because we want to know where they are, where they're spending their time. And to avoid potential ship strikes, anything like that. So it's, yeah.
So can you do the detection and classification, tracking, localizing with a singular hydrophone, or is that something that you'd need an array to do?
Yeah. So for detecting and classifying, you can use one hydrophone. For anything else, it gets a little bit more tricky. So if you're wanting to localize and track, you want at least 2 hydrophones. So as I said, like in the slides, where you want to find a bearing to where they are. And then if the more hydrophones, the better you're going to actually be able to see where they are. So you're going to have synchronized hydrophones that can show a time of arrival. So how long it took from that sound to arrive to each hydrophone. You can kind of decide or like track where they are based on their time of arrival to those hydrophones.
So you also mentioned autonomous versus static deployments. Why would somebody choose one over the other?
Yeah, okay, so for a lot of the cable deployments, I guess, you have to be able to cable your stuff back to shore, and that does become pretty complex, difficult to do in some areas, especially if there's high traffic areas. So you might not be able to put a cable down in some areas because it keeps on getting pulled up or keeps on getting damaged. So that might not be useful for some areas. So instead, you can actually put something out in the water that can transmit all that data back to shore without having that cable there and risk of damage to that cable.
And we have one final question here, again about PAMGuard. Can you listen to the data at the same time as viewing it in PAMGuard?
Yes, you can. So recently we were actually able to integrate the sound output to our PAMGuard modules, so the PAMGuard plugin for IC Listen, and we're able to listen to the sound at the same time it's streaming in PAMGuard by adding a sound output. And as I showed on that first screen where you could see that you can like increase the gain, so you can increase how loud the hydrophone is streaming through PAMGuard. That's very useful for when you're actually looking at that feature.
And we actually have another question here from YouTube. So this user, KidGreen78, has asked so they're a college student that's fascinated by ocean acoustics, and they want to move into a career in ocean acoustics. How do you approach it from a college standpoint, and what type of training do you have, Jillian?
So right now, I have undergrad in bio, and then I took an advanced diploma in ocean technology. So I was able to go to the Nova Scotia Community College and take a variety of courses all on ocean technology and be able to be introduced to it that way. And so I was hired onto Ocean Sonics, and I was able to learn actually pretty much through the job and being able to do research online and with other researchers as well. So I kind of came onto it that way. But there are so many different ways that you can actually be able to do types of different underwater acoustics. I would definitely say an undergrad and then potentially a master's in ocean acoustics.
And you have some additional training as well, don't you, Jillian?
Yes, so I also have my passive acoustic monitoring operator as well.
Yeah, and I know that you did that course through Edgewise Environmental, but if you're not located on the east coast of Canada, or actually they've expanded now to the west coast as well, if you're not located in Canada, I'm sure that there is an alternative pretty much anywhere that there is ocean activities. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more, I'm sure Jillian would be able to give you a bit more insight into her pathway to being our resident marine mammal expert. But thank you so much for your question. And I think that is all the questions that we have for now. So Jillian, again, thank you so much for joining us. And if there is a question that you didn't get to ask, or if there's a topic that you'd like to see covered during our web series, please contact myself or contact Jillian. I will share our emails with you again, so that if you need to send us a message, you can feel free, or you can always drop us a line on our social media channels. And again, if you want to revisit this presentation, it will be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our Facebook page, and I'll share the link through our social media accounts. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you next week when we go for another deep dive into ocean acoustics and industry. See you then.
Yay, thank you, see you.